combat style. Guys, what are we doing? Just copy Expedition 33. We all know that game invented RPGs. Come on. Hey, what's good, Joe? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. So I've been writing some new scripts and sifting through some old ones, and I found this one that I wrote like about a month or so ago. But what's fun about it is that it's kind of an ever-evolving topic of conversation, especially when it comes to Pokemon. But I do mean it when I say it's consistent. I literally got a comment today on one of my recent videos talking about stale combat in Generation 9. So yeah, I think we should probably have a little bit of a conversation about this because I do think it's really interesting. But really quick, I still need a favor from you guys. Comment submissions for this will close this week, but I just wanted to bring it up one last time that I did ask you guys what your guys' opinion were in regards to the potential of a gimmick in Pokemon Winds and Waves. You can go ahead and answer the question right there in the community tab, or you can join up in the Discord so that you can get your responses prioritized. That's pretty much all on that. Anyhow, you already know what's going on by now. Look at this nice cozy chair that's all nice and warmed up for you. Why don't you go ahead and plop your feet up right here. I'm gonna hand you a nice cold glass of pineapple juice, whipped up a nice hot plate of Blaziken burger with some giraffe egg ankles on the side. Go ahead and munch on that for me while we talk about how turn-based combat can potentially evolve going forward with modern Pokemon. Now, before anything else, we should probably clarify that everything that we probably talk about here won't come anytime soon, if we're being realistic. We've already gotten our first glimpse of Generation 10, and based on the way the trainer was throwing the Pokeball in of itself, I could tell that we are probably going back to our straight up traditional turn-based combat that we know and love from regular Pokemon. Whether or not that's a good or a bad thing completely depends on the person. I myself have no problem with turn-based combat as long as we have a lot of other aspects within said combat, probably the gimmick and just how we go about entering combat and stuff like that, that can still make it fun. As a big fan of general RPGs as well as turn-based in particular as well, I have no problem with it being just that. There's a lot of things that I really want out of Pokemon. I want its general quality to get better. I want its stories to get stronger. I want its characters to be even more interesting. I want a lot of the other aspects of the gameplay to be improved and deepened and just more interesting to engage with. It's kind of hard to imagine the generational titles being anything but turn-based, right? I think of other super long-time RPGs like Dragon Quest, for example, that has pretty much not really changed its style all that much in terms of the mainline titles. Correct me if I'm wrong here because it has been a good while since I've actually played the game, but to my memory, Echoes of an Elusive Age, Dragon Quest XI, was extremely simple and straightforward in terms of its turn-based combat. There was nothing crazy about it. And for the 11th numbered title in a franchise like that, you would think people would be a lot more upset and annoyed by something like that, but to my knowledge, the game reviewed very well, so clearly nobody had that big of an issue with it. Now, of course, there's people out there that will definitely argue the fact that Dragon Quest is simply a deeper RPG in general. It has much stronger world building, it has a lot of unique characters and situations, and because of those aspects just generally feeling stronger, they are willing to let the very simple combat situation slide. However, I think it's also fair to argue with an alternative situation. In one of my recent videos, we talked about the dialogue situation when it comes to Pokemon. Long story short, we had an in-depth conversation about why people are losing patience with the dialogue when it comes to Pokemon. There were a lot of diverse opinions when it came to that video, actually. There's plenty of people that find the dialogue boring or repetitive or just not generally interesting enough to be bothered with. And I found that extremely interesting because while I personally believe that the writing could definitely be stronger and better and more interesting overall, I do think that generally speaking, their writing is improving and getting more unique when it comes to the stories of Pokemon games. The primary consensus that I personally came to was that we are definitely suffering from a patient issue when it comes to modern media. People are getting used to quick rewards and payoff for spending any form of time engaging with something, and because of that, they are losing a lot of patience for things that take their time to explain or build something up. The entertainment and excitement has to be there the entire time. There is no such thing as slowing down, taking your time with a lot of people. They just don't have it in them. So with something like RPGs that are naturally a lot slower and a lot more repetitive because you're doing the same thing pretty much over and over again, people don't really have an interest in that like they used to. It's one thing for like an action RPG like Kingdom Hearts, for example, where you're constantly moving, constantly dodging, attacking, finding all these different ways to best your opponent. In turn-based RPGs, you're hitting buttons and seeing what the outcome is based on the choices that you made. That's not fast enough or nearly engaging enough for a lot of people. They just want more. Obviously, because of this, modern media has found different ways to try and alleviate this situation by trying to make everything that they do in games a lot more generally entertaining across the board. So now it's kind of considered a massive risk to do something like a traditional turn-based RPG in this era, because a lot of people nowadays just don't have the patience for it. One of the reasons as to why Expedition 33 made such a heavy wave during its run last year was because people hadn't engaged with an RPG like that in such a long time, and on top of that, it felt very unique to a lot of people. Now, I'm assuming that my community is very much a lot like me, in which they engage with a lot of different RPGs, so I have to imagine that something like Expedition 33 wasn't all that new to you because you played something like Mario and Luigi. We'll delve a little bit deeper into this conversation, but essentially the idea here is that because people didn't really want to engage with anything that had anything to do with turn-based RPGs, they didn't delve deep enough into the genre to know that that style of combat existed for a very long time. It just took a different style of presentation and voila, now everybody loves RPGs all of a sudden. So now we've come full circle. People were talking about how high quality and fun and good looking and interesting something like Expedition 33 was, and then comparing it to something like Pokemon, which technically is within the same genre, and being disappointed. On top of graphical fidelity just not really being where it should be by now, people are still very much feeling like the gameplay in of itself is very stale and needs a little bit of a change to really help engagement. So now you're sitting there wondering, do we really heavily need to change how combat works in generational titles for Pokemon? Now, when I do think about something like that, my first immediate thought is to consider what was going on with the Legends titles. Like I've been saying for a long time now, the Legends titles are, going forward, always going to be mainline titles. They are not spin-offs. However, they are experimental titles in which they can play around with certain things that they can't really comfortably do safely in the generational titles. And one of the things that people were panicking about the most, ironically, was the combat system in Pokemon Legends ZA. And the reason for that is because it is easily one of the most massive changes any of the mainline titles has ever made. Now, me personally, that was my favorite aspect about Legends ZA. The fact that we had real-time battling was absolutely extraordinary. I loved my time with that combat system. And I've definitely seen a lot of others agree with me. They were super happy with the fact that they went out of their way to make such a heavy change, and they had a lot of fun with real-time battles as opposed to turn-based. And they would honestly prefer it if we went forward with this combat system. And to an extent, I agree. I would definitely be 100% okay with this combat system being a staple for Legends titles going forward. However, there was a lot more backlash from this combat system than I ever anticipated. It's too fast, it's not tactical, there's no held items, it's too different. I had to sit back for a bit because I was so confused. People were talking for years about the fact that the general combat for Pokemon games has been extremely stale for a long time. It needs a major shakeup. Obviously, gimmicks were not enough. While a cool addition, they still needed something a little more substantial. We finally get something extremely substantial, something that completely rips the roots out from the ground and gives us something unique and different, and people aren't messing with it. And I'm just left so confused. I can understand not liking it, but like getting mad at the fact that they tried something different was astounding to me. I don't think it was a bad call to make the combat system work like this. Where people's confusion clearly came in was the fact that they thought that this was going to be what the combat was going to look like for Pokemon games going forward. That would have been way too drastic, but the fact that people considered that and got completely upset about it makes me wonder, what does anybody actually want then? Real-time combat will always be just generally a lot more engaging because you are rarely ever letting your foot off the gas when you're engaging with the gameplay. In terms of turn-based combat, you can do that pretty much whenever you want. Go make a full meal while deciding what your next turn is going to be against an opponent. That's how it's always been. I think that the mechanic is super refreshing. I think that for Legends titles specifically, I'd be totally okay if we continue to use it. But we can guarantee one thing for certain. Generation 10 and going forward will not adopt that mechanic specifically. There's no way they'll ever get rid of turn-based combat. So clearly, that was way too drastic drastic of a change. People do not want to jump ship on turn-based combat completely. So now, back at square one, I ask myself, does turn-based combat need to change in Pokemon? Obviously, this is heavily dependent on who you ask. If you were to ask me, I would say, no, not really. I think that there could be some really cool changes and additions here and there, but fundamentally, as it is, I don't have a problem with it. Not that I'm a purist or anything like that, but I do think that if we were to take too many drastic changes to the general turn-based combat formula of Pokemon, it probably wouldn't be familiar to too many people anymore, and that would make way too many people way too upset way too fast. So I don't think that the system needs to be completely eradicated or completely changed to something unfamiliar to make it better. So what exactly needs to change here? Obviously, the type matchup system is something that's become critical to JRPGs across the world. This is something very standard and that can't go anywhere for Pokemon in particular. Developing diverse teams throughout your playthrough so that you can handle any situation that you may come across during your personal playthrough is like the entire point. So that's not going anywhere, right? As far as your traditional turn-based battles go, I think that gimmicks are one of the most important things they have ever added to the franchise. So that's obviously not going anywhere anytime soon either. Especially when you consider the fact that gimmicks are the best way that they could play around and experiment with different systems in battle. And in modern titles, it's where they could get the most experimentative without completely fundamentally changing everything. So we heavily rely too much on gimmicks for that to go anywhere. And in all honesty, you can't really have a fun RPG without some crazy RNG hijinks. As scared as somebody might be during a very critical battle where they might land a critical hit, we rely on those sometimes too. We also rely on attacks missing us and certain moves hitting more than 2 or 3 times if we could max that out. It all depends on the RNG. But I love its presence. I love how it makes things a little bit more unpredictable and a little bit more interesting. It just makes things more fun. So looking at all of the prime mechanics in Pokemon that we have so far, I like what we've got. So what can we change? One of the things that came to mind when I was considering this video a while back was how Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy VII operated. I'll be honest, I don't know as much about Chrono Trigger as I would like to. What I do know is that it does have the hybrid turn-based real-time combat situation. But essentially taking a page out of Final Fantasy VII's book, instead of waiting for your turn to attack, you're waiting for a meter to fill back up every single time you make a move. In that game, every attack you would use, every special you would utilize, and every item that you would use would fall right back into that meter. You would have to wait until that meter filled back up until you could make your next move. Even during its time, that was an extremely unique mechanic that you didn't really see anywhere at all, I don't think. And what's interesting about this is the fact that it's already been utilized in Pokemon in a spin-off, specifically with Pokemon Masters EX. It's been a very long time since I've actually sat down with this game, and there's so many updates and new events and things like that now that I just can't see myself getting back into it. But the general concept behind these 3v3 battles and the way they utilize this meter to use their attacks was really, really interesting to me. See, the thing here is that they have multiple bars set up within the meter. So it's not like you could just use any move you want willy-nilly as soon as a bar fills up. Naturally, the stronger the move, the higher the cost. So in certain cases, if you want to use a certain move that's likely to deal a lot more damage to your opponent, you need to take the risk and wait out those 4 bars to charge up. Doing it like this mitigates the potential of spamming so that you don't just get free easy wins every battle. You have to calculate and strategize what kind of moves you have on your Pokemon so that you have a well-rounded move set to go into battle with. So this is just something that's been on the back of my mind. I think that this concept could work really well to help mitigate the engagement and immersion factor during battle. And in turn, it would definitely help make the combat a lot more exciting. I feel like there could be a more interesting way to make it so that 1v1 battles are a lot more fun or a lot more interesting, but I feel like this could be a potential way of going about that. Another thing that I seem to have heavily considered when I originally wrote this was the prospect of real boss battles. Pokemon is kind of an awkward situation when it comes to this in particular because by technicality, we do have something equivalent to boss battles within Pokemon, of course. We have gym leaders, we have team leaders or crime bosses, we have raid battles and anything equivalent to that in later generations. And I say awkward in this situation because when you compare what we do have available in Pokemon to other traditional JRPG bosses, it's a little bit of a stark difference, no? Fighting something like Eternatus in Generation 8 is nothing like fighting Yaldabaoth in Persona 5. That thing has multiple hit points, crazy area effects, nasty debuffs. He's actually genuinely scary. Eternatus, not nearly as much. Obviously, at all times when I discuss something like this, I know for a fact that I am not the primary audience anymore. It is usually for younger audiences so that they don't get overwhelmed or scared away from finishing the game. Obviously, something like Eternatus is not meant to be that hard or that big or that scary, but at the same time, a quote-unquote boss battle like Eternatus doesn't really feel like it's something that's gone out of its way to truly test my mettle, put all of the skills that I have built up to that point to the test. So then I consider something like that, and maybe that's one of the reasons why people feel like turn-based combat is so stale, because pretty much across the board, whether it's against a trainer, a gym leader, or even a raid battle, most of it feels pretty much exactly the same. I don't know, maybe they could put a little bit more effort into something like that. Give us multiple phases that are a lot scarier the second time around. Give us some actual hitboxes for other areas on the body of a major Pokemon that might be scary. I don't know, I just don't think it would be all that crazy to try and maybe lean into the more traditional sense when it comes to boss battles to make things feel a bit more epic, a bit more high stakes, a bit scarier. And maybe that could help change people's tone. I don't know. All in all, it seems like there's a lot of different little ways here and there that turn-based combat could potentially be improved in Pokemon specifically. Although, based on what we've talked about here, I think one thing is for certain though. Nobody 100% knows exactly how to perfect turn-based combat. There's no simple one-answer solution to a situation like this. My consensus is the games are still fun. They're not perfect, definitely flawed, but they're still fun. And if everything surrounding the game can be improved and made better and still amplify the experience, then I'm totally fine with a little repetitive turn-based combat. Because one way or another, we're gonna catch our little creatures, use them to fight other little creatures, to turn them into big creatures, and have a fun adventure. Simple as that. If turn-based combat is the way to get from A to B, then that's how it's gonna be. I like turn-based combat, and I don't mind a bit of repetitiveness, so this has never been that big of a deal to me overall. But again, if we could find ways to improve it, then that would be swell as hell. But hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. So that just about does it for this one. Sorry if this one wasn't as, smooth and direct as far as what I was trying to get across as far as my point. That's probably why this one sat on the back burner for the last like 2 months probably, because there wasn't really too much of a heavy point on this one. I just wanted to just kind of talk about the topic in of itself and just, see where that led me. So, it is what it is. We had a little bit of a ramble, and that's okay sometimes, we can do that, right? I think it's fair to have some fun little just conversational rambles. Of course, I have no doubt that anybody who sees this will definitely have their own opinion on how they feel in regards to turn-based combat and whether or not it works for them, how they would like to see it implemented in Pokemon, and you guys will all have your own unique ideas on how it can be improved. So I'm gonna leave y'all to it. But I think that just about does it for me for now. So I'm just going to pass the mic over in your direction. I want you guys to tell me everything that you're thinking in the comment section below. Do you agree that turn-based combat as it is totally fine? It's not the biggest deal in the world that we have turn-based combat, especially going into Generation 10, and that we will probably generally have fun with it anyway, despite, it not feeling more in-depth and stuff like that? Or are you on the opposing side? The stale turn-based combat is way too repetitive, it's too boring, it's not for you, and it needs to go. We need to replace it with something that is a lot more engaging and immersive. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I am always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, yes sir, it does appear to be good dad of the clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and do just that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time.